Hey there, fellow adventurers. Welcome. I'm GM Coblin, and I'm here to talk to you about creating your own custom campaign world. As someone who's been knee-deep in Dungeons and Dragons for decades, let me be your guide as we delve into the art of creating our own custom world. Secret 1, the power of imagination. Picture this. You're gathered around a table with your closest friends, dice clutched in your hand, ready to embark on an epic journey. That's the magic of a tabletop role-playing game, building a custom world that takes that magic to a whole new level. It's like being the architect of your own fantasy realm, where every corner is waiting to be explored. When I first started playing TTRPGs, it was Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition, and I was amazed by the endless possibilities that it offered. I'd spend hours poring over books and sketching out maps and dreaming up characters. And let me tell you, feeling of stepping into my own world is something unlike I think anyone gets to experience if they don't get to use those creative juices. But in using your imagination, just remember, there is no limit. There is nothing too extreme, nothing too crazy for your world. If it's your world, and especially if you can make your players believe, then it's fine. Floating rocks in the sky, portals around every corner to different dimensions, reverse gravity. It's all on the table. Now, setting the stage. So where do you start? Well, grab a pen and some paper, or your favorite map making software using Notion or something else. And first, at least today, we're going to start uncharted territory. Think about the geography of the world. Is it sprawling? Is it a sprawling continent, a cluster of islands, or something completely unique? My first custom world was inspired by the map of the D&D world of Kryn, if anyone knows what that is. I took that map and ran with it, creating a world full of lush forests and mountains, towering monstrous ruins, taking the parts that I loved of that world, and of The Last Home being one, and discarding the parts that I didn't like, bringing in my own flavor. And starting with the general geography can sometimes help because it allows you to get a feel for the world. So when you're creating your world's geography, don't forget to consider how it's going to influence the game. Mountains might serve as natural barriers or be home to ancient civilizations, while rivers can be the lifeblood of your cities and towns. Don't be afraid to get a little creative with it. Like I said before, after all, anything's possible. Also remember, if you don't want to start with a large map, maybe start with a country, great or small, or start with a town and expand your world session by session as your players advance and increase the world as you need and as you feel more comfortable in creating it. The last one that I created, I started with 3 different sections in this polarized world. And I did that for that campaign specifically because it allowed me to set the tone of why there is a split the way that there is. And then I can define the features with the geography and with the cities and settings, depending on how they line up in accordance with that divide. But now comes the fun part, mapping out your world. Don't worry if you're not an artist, even a rough sketch will do. The key is to think about how geography influences your world. Mountains, as previously stated, can create those natural barriers or be home to fearsome dragons. Maybe that's the next part of your character's advancement, your player's adventure. Maybe there's not a pass, so they can't be climbed, so they have to be flown over. When I was creating my first custom world, I spent hours drawing out every little detail. It was a labor of love. I had read all the books and just loved the lore of the world and wanted to put my own spin on it. But as I said, you don't have to start there. you can progress as far as you need. The one thing when you create a world and your story, if you create it for fun, but don't be upset if your players don't explore every part of your world and every hidden section or intrigue that you have created for your world. More than once, 100 times, my players have passed up on arcs or background elements or not wanting to go over to that dark shadowy forest or whatever not. Don't get upset if your players are not as excited about one aspect of your world as you are. Every world needs its inhabitants. And that's where characters, NPCs, I guess, come in. Whether they are a noble knight, a cunning rogue, or a wise wizard, your characters should feel like they belong in the world, in the area, the region that you've created. You can give them a backstory, quirks, motivations that tie them to the fabric of your world. I try to write down for the NPCs my party are likely to meet the name, a single line, or whatever I need, something that gives me a note so that I know the motivation. And if it's something more important, I will add that extra information as I go through. You don't have to flesh out every character in a town, the baker, the candlestick maker, the butcher. Give them a life story. Players may not ever dive into it. Just something that gets them past that blank NPC that sold the party their bread this morning and getting them on to the next part of the adventure or the next hook. A lot of times, my players included, don't want to delve into the history of everyone that they sell their loot from the goblin den from. So I don't spend as much time on every NPC. I mean, while it can be fun to create characters, putting too much time into an NPC that's not going to be a focal point to catch your player's attention, I mean, could just end up leaving you let down. I do have reoccurring characters through some of my campaigns. Usually they're the ones that the players find amusing or funny, or they spark an interest. Also, as previously stated, be prepared for the exact opposite. Your players may get infatuated with an NPC that didn't originally have a name, didn't have a backstory, but that character, they could end up wanting to raise them up as a cohort, bring them along, someone they talk to or wish to interact with on a regular basis. And sometimes it's best to roll with it when you create a character, and I've had a few where the players like them. Either it's because my accent was really good for that day, or it was just their mood. And he stuck around for sessions and sometimes the rest of the campaign. Now, fleshing out lore and history. What's a good fantasy world without having a bit of lore and history? I mean, we're exploring ancient forgotten tombs and long lost treasures in deep caverns. Deep dive into the past of your world, crafting myths and legends, historical events that shape its present. Maybe there's a legendary hero who saved the world from an ancient evil, or a long forgotten civilization whose ruins hold untold treasure. Beware when you delve too greedily and too deep, though, for the forgotten stories and histories that litter your world that you create, that will litter the pages of your PC's notes, may be a little excessive. I find that history is a great thing to outline and form when they interact with an order or when they're making a deal, certain locations. But as much as we may like to do it and find that our players tend to check out if there is too much, I don't usually give them too much lore that is needed for whatever they are doing. Usually I have a character that took a special lore trait for her character, so I'll give her some extra lore, some random information about historical heroes throughout the campaign. But as much lore as we could put into a world, I find that I don't give too much without telling my characters it's just a generic description in some ways, because Now, building factions and societies for your world. No world is really complete without its share of factions, its noble courts, either houses vying for power, underground guilds pulling the strings from the shadows, maybe one that is ran by a special beholder. Those groups add a lot of depth and intrigue to your world. Think about how they interact with each other and with your players. The allies, enemies, something in between. What about a secret society of wizards called the Arcane Order, who are always meddling in the affairs of kings and queens? And they don't have to all be meshed into some interlocking net. Think of hierarchy in some cases, where you may have these noble societies that rule a country or rule the area, and there's intrigue with that. And you might have gang lords, those hidden away rogue guilds that don't have anything to do with it. All they do is try and skirt the law and try and stay at a different level, happy with dealing in their trades and peddling their mysteries without having to reach for the king's crown. Crafting memorable locations. Now, it being time to populate your world with these memorable locations, whether it's bustling cities teeming with life or haunted forests shrouded in darkness, each location should have its own personality and history. Maybe one of those mountain peaks I spoke about. Think about sights, sounds, smells that make each place unique. The Bog of Eternal Stench, Sword Coast. Don't be afraid to get creative like anything else in your world. Make it so that maybe it's the one part of the mountain where gravity works differently and you have these floating pools or bowls of rock that allow your players to traverse the area differently, but it's something unique about that area that they will hopefully remember. Having exotic creatures and NPCs that traveled from maybe the multiverse, maybe the tribe in that region is so unique, it's going to stand out. Building your custom world, it's not always going to be easy, especially not for everyone. There are bound to be challenges along the way. Maybe you're struggling to come up with a cohesive history, or you're having trouble balancing the power dynamics between factions or for encounters. That's okay. Every world builder faces obstacles. The important thing is to stay flexible. Be open to new ideas as they come to you. Sometimes the best solutions come when you least expect them or from the minds of your players. Don't be scared to let your players take part in the world building with you. Maybe they want to find a specific kind of place in town faction. Your players having multiple minds, and usually they're more fresh by the time they sit down at the table than we are, is an important tool that can help build the world you're all experiencing. The goal is to immerse everyone into the world that you've created. Encourage your players to explore, interact with NPCs, and uncover secrets of your world. And remember, the best campaigns are ones where everyone feels like they're part of something special, maybe something bigger than they are. Another tip for world building: steal it. This reminds me of a book that is titled Steal Like an Artist. It's not bad. Now, if you're creating something to be published, be warned, there are certain hoops you have to jump through so you don't have to deal with copyright issues. But as a home GM, as a world for you and just your friends, take what you want, give nothing back. Take the city that you wanted, the map even, the landscape, technology, races. Like I said, my first campaign I can remember was based off of Kryn from the Dragonlance novels. I loved the world, the feeling it had, the books. So I took many of the things that I loved about the setting and I used it in my world. Names, places, history, lore, a lot of it just repeated. I still have nods to that first world in my current campaign that I'm running for my level 15 players in Pathfinder right now. Just because you fell in love with an idea or something that someone else created doesn't mean you can't use it. You're being inspired by it. Help create your own world, put your own touches to it. And let's be honest, all art generally inspires someone else to do something either similar or to try and do something to their own taste. Building a custom world is a labor of love. But trust me, it's worth it. There's nothing quite like seeing your players' faces light up as they explore this world that you have created, that you have breathed life into and spent time into making. Don't be afraid to unleash your creativity and let your imagination run wild. As you venture forth into the wilds of world building, remember that there are no wrong answers. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or a newcomer to a world of tabletop RPGs, building a custom world is an adventure all on its own. So grab your dice, gather your friends, and let the journey begin. If you like this video, check out my others. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you have any tips or requests, drop them in the comments below. And until next time, may your crits be epic, your adventures legendary, and your gaming table filled with laughter.